Welcome back. I just want to do a real quick video. I've been talking to a couple buddies that are getting ready to start to get into reloading, as well as a few guys I've just met or ran into on the range. So I'm just going to start kind of going through a few simple steps, kind of my reloading process, maybe some things that I've learned throughout the way that if you can skip the trial and error steps that I had, it might save you a little bit of time, money, effort, whatever it may be. First one, I just thought to do it because I actually had to do it today. Got a new action, so wanted to find where I needed to load to be touching the lands, so I could kind of go from there as far as how far down to seat my bullet. So I thought I'd make a quick video of the methods I have used. I have used 3 of them personally. I know there's a lot more. I feel like people are coming out with clever, creative ways to do stuff all the time, so there's probably some I haven't even seen yet, but these are the 3 that I have used. I started with number 1, moved to number 2, and I have landed on number 3, which I've done for the past few years. And if you're able to do that, I don't think there's a better way. So we'll jump right into it. I started with the Hornady, the OAL, the overall length gauge. If you're not familiar with it, essentially what it is, you have to buy a case that comes threaded for each specific caliber. Not sure if you'll be able to see the threads there, but you would buy it for your specific caliber. Essentially, the case mouth is opened, just wider than the bullet, which allows it to go all the way down into the case. Then this rod here, you're able to push the bullet back out. So essentially what you would do is stick this through your action into your chamber, hold it there and start pushing the rod here as your bullet comes farther and farther out of the case. Essentially what you're supposed to do is just kind of keep slowly inching along until you feel it stop or touch the lands. At that point, they have a little set screw here you can tighten, so this rod is in place and won't move. And then they have a little kind of divot, if you can see it here, cut out. And what that allows you to do is take your calipers and get that caliper arm in there right at the base of the case to measure whether you're doing overall length or case-based ogive, whatever it may be. I personally suggest case-based ogive if you are getting into reloading. But this is how I started. I think it worked for what it is. It's relatively cheap. I think you have to push the bullet into the lands a little bit to actually feel. So it's not when you just start to touch it, it's when you're into the lands. So I think it gets you close enough. I don't think it's super accurate, but to get into reloading, to find where your lands are and then kind of just start jumping back from there, I think it works, and I think it's a pretty cheap option. Option number 2, if you're able to do it, you can actually remove your barrel. And I think it might have been Mark at Short Action Customs that I saw do this. But if you were able to remove your barrel, option number 2 is for you. If not, just bear with me. We'll get to option number 3 here in a second. But essentially what you can do is drop a loaded round in and see if it's sinking all the way down into the chamber freely or if there's any sort of tension. So for this one, it will go down a little bit farther. You might not be able to tell on camera if I push it, but then to get it out, it's a decent amount of pressure that I have to apply to get it out. So it's not going in and out freely. And then just to show you what it would look like if you eventually kept seating the bullet deeper and deeper to where you're off the lands. It's my 204 Ruger barrel, but if we hold it up like this, I mean, it's in and out freely. So you could just use your little nail and it does that. So there is nothing touching the lands in here. I also started using this method to make sure I was bumping the shoulders back on my case far enough as I was doing this. If I was to put a fired case in here, it would not seat down flush like that. And then when it's resized and you bump your shoulder, it'll look exactly like this. So that's option number 2. Again, it worked. I don't know if I found it to be super accurate, because sometimes I felt like I was where it should be, and then I pushed it down a little bit. I don't know. It seemed like it was kind of more hassle than it was worth. I think it works really good for testing to make sure your brass is resized, but as far as finding your land ones, same thing as option number 1. I think it'll get you pretty close, and then you can kind of go from there. But I do think option number 3 tells you exactly where you touch it. So we'll move over to the other bench and get into that one here in a second. And finally, option number 3. This is the one I have used for quite a while now, and it's the only one I really use if I am able to do so. So to start, I have my terminus use action here. Have the bolt. I've removed the firing pin. We've also removed the ejector, if it'll focus there. So with that being said, when we put the bolt in, there's no pressure, no free fall. This is actually a really good way to check to make sure you bumped your shoulder back far enough as well while resizing brass. But essentially what I would do is take a piece of resized brass here, and I actually will just clip it right in under the ejector and slide it in. So what that's going to do before I start measuring is just ensure that that was bumped correctly, and it's going to free fall like that. So I know if there's any sort of pressure on the bolt handle, it is not coming from my brass. At that point, what I would do is go ahead and move forward with starting to seat bullets and testing from there. So for the sake of time, I already have quite a few loaded up here, but this is kind of the exact same process I would go through. So to start with, I mean, this one, just to kind of get my point across, is loaded extremely long. But what I would do is load it in. I'll make sure it's not hitting anything on the way in. And as you can see, the bolt handle is not dropping. Probably can't see it on camera, but I mean, there's a noticeable gap right here that you can see with the naked eye. So clearly too long. So what I would do with that moving forward, there we go, is bump that one down quite a bit and go from there. So I bumped the next one down quite a bit, but we're just going to repeat the process. Clip it right into the extractor, insert the bolt, make sure the bolt's not touching anything on the way. So again, not going down on its own, and again, you're not going to be able to see it on camera, but noticeably less distance there. I could probably go ahead and force this closed if I wanted to. I'm obviously not going to do that, but you can tell, or I can tell, that there is a much smaller gap here. So definitely moving in the right direction. You know, what I would do now is take this back to my seating die and keep bumping it down farther. So that's what we did with the next one here. Bumped it down lower. Here, the bolt, no gap anymore. So this could close, and I can push it down like that with just a little bit of pressure, but it's still hitting, and it's not going to close freely on its own. So at that point, I can tell we're close. So I'm going to start inching these down, I mean, just in very, very small increments, maybe 2 thousandths to start, and then when we get even closer, I would drop it down to 1. So we will repeat that process again. So very close. It's not going, I mean, just a slight push of the finger and it's going to go down. So we are very close. So from here moving forward, what I would do is I would just start bumping them down 1/1000th at a time. Kind of a tedious process to go back and forth, but I think it's personally the best way to find exactly where you're touching your lands. Put in one more here, bump this one down 1/1000th. So this one will close. Might not be able to tell on camera, but there's just a touch of pressure. I can feel it with my finger. It's very noticeable if you're here doing it in person. So I will bump it down one more thousandths from there, and we should be all set. So there we are in. That's free. I know, obviously we checked my brass is good, so I now know this bullet is not touching the lands of the rifle. The one previous or prior to it was 1/1000th longer, and that one was touching. So what I actually do is I will go back. Here's the one we just did second to last. So this was the one that was just barely touching. And then I'll go ahead and take my calipers and measure that. And 1925. So that is my case to the case base to ogive. That is how I prefer to measure it. So I think everyone should measure. If you were doing overall length, you could measure that as well. But 1925, that is touching the lands. So any adjustment I make after that will be based off of that number. And that sounds about right. I tested this rifle about 500 rounds ago. It was at 1918. So as the lands are starting to go a little bit farther, you know, getting a little bit farther away. But I do not chase the lands, just something to note there. So again, that is how I do it. I remove the ejector as well as the firing pin, creating that free floating bolt. I will say, if you have a bolt, like here my Zermatt TL3 has a mechanical ejector, has the floating bolt head, so there's no real ejector we could move from this, so I couldn't do it with this one. But any Remington 700 clone that has just the standard, I believe it's the M16 extractor or ejector, excuse me, you will be able to do that with. So any action I have, I do these with the Terminus Zeus. I do this with the Defiance, the Lone Peak Arms, and it works perfectly. When I do it when I get a brand new barrel, so I know exactly where I'm touching at to start, and then I just go from there. So I hope this helped. These are just a few ways that I've kind of learned and progressed throughout my career. You know, maybe if you can jump straight to this one and skip kind of the learning pains or process of the other two, might save you a little bit of time and get a little bit more of an accurate measurement. So I do hope this helped. I did not show removing the firing pin or the ejector on here just for the sake of time. So I will post another video just showing how to do that, in case this is something you're interested in or ever wanted to disassemble for cleaning or something like that. So keep an eye out for that video. I'll get that posted showing how I did that, and then you should be all set. Thank you.